This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 108.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, Betty?
Not too much. Nice little morning today. Just spoke to John, or no, just about to speak to John Kerr.
We spoke to John Kerr. We're recording this after. It's
okay, we can say that.
Yeah. We want to know what to introduce, right?
Sure.
Okay, so John came up with a new book, the Sales Engineer Manager book. The link's going to be in the show notes, and we're going to talk about the book. Basically, it's at least we're going to give everybody a glimpse of what's in the book. So if you're interested in reading it, you know what's in there, and it's just fun to talk to John, right?
Absolutely, and it's so good to have finally a good de facto book for SE managers. There's so many, Jen, you'll hear it on the call itself. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe tens of thousands of leadership and management books out there. But so few ever focus on the sales engineer manager now that that's starting to become more of a function within organizations. And so to actually now have a good now de facto resource for this is so great. And it expands out on some of the other conversations. So show 100, when John last came on, we spoke a little bit about sales engineering management. And that was actually the first time, at least for me anyways, that he introduced those the 3 rules, and then he added a 4th maybe prerequisite rule this time around managing yourself. But and even in his book, there was, in his first book, or like a second edition, there's I think maybe a chapter or maybe a few chapters for SE managers, but now there's a whole book for it. And yeah, to be able to talk about it, I'm looking forward to diving in myself.
Yeah, like I just did a quick search on Amazon.ca, so it might be a little bit different than Amazon.com for leadership for dummies, and there's 2,000 results. And that's
a specific type.
Yeah, leadership for dummies. So like there might be a lot of books about leadership. And this book, although it's called the SE Manager, it's more about leadership. So I really enjoyed my conversation with John. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. If you haven't done so, leave a rating and review. Otherwise, we're not going to let you listen to the rest of the podcast. Well, we can't do that. It would be a huge favor to us if you guys can leave a rating and review. Mainly, it helps people understand that this is a legit podcast, especially since we have 108 episodes as of today. So enough of that. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back, John. Mr. John Kerr, you're back for the 3rd time on this podcast. Thanks for coming back on.
I'm honored. It's great to be back. I think this is a wonderful service you provide to the SE community. So thrilled I can contribute in any small way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I understand that you just published a book.
Yes, I did. The 3rd Mastering Technical Sales book. This is the Sales Engineer Manager's Handbook, and it's designed for SE leaders, not just managers. And it's a tactical and strategic guide to what the job entails and how to do it, or what to expect if you think you want to be a manager. So,
okay, so maybe we can define. You just separated SE leaders from SE managers. Maybe we can define what an SE leader is.
Sure. Well, let's talk what an SE manager is.
Sure.
So an SE manager is normally viewed of as a first-line manager. So they are responsible for the care and feeding, if you like, of a certain number of SEs who report directly into them. So manager, I think of as it's a position. It's an HR position. Leader is something different. I mean, there's the old cliche that you don't need a title to become a leader. I totally believe that's true. And so Chris Daly and myself, Chris is my co-author, we went backwards and forwards actually on the title of the book as to whether it should be the SE Leader's Handbook or the SE Manager's Handbook. And we went with the tactical approach in the end and spoke about the manager's handbook. So, a leader, I think it was Liz you had on maybe like 6-7 weeks ago, and she spoke about the immense loyalty and how people will basically follow her into battle no matter what. And I think that's really what a first line.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Hey,
can you hear us?
Yeah, it seems that my internet this time is not doing so well.
All right, over to Benny.
I guess so. With respect to just say leadership and management, and you mentioned that SE or anybody rather could be an SE leader, but for this book though, would you still recommend it for those that may still be looking to kind of fulfill that leadership hole they may have in them, even if it's not to move into a formal management position? Or would you say the book is still applicable for those types of people as well?
Oh, the book is designed to cater to a wide range of people. So the answer to the question is yes, we would recommend it. So it's designed for people who don't necessarily have the title, but are effectively leaders in their organization, for wannabe managers, people who are thinking about moving into that position, and a significant chunk of SEs want to do that, all the way up to somebody who's a global VP of 600,000 SEs around the world. So Chris and I tried to have sections in there that catered and are directed to everybody.
Okay, fair enough. So what would you say to the person that maybe to the sales leader perhaps that sees a book like this and says, oh, I don't need to pick up this book. I know that my team of sales engineers, they're required to have as much activity, to be on as many demos as they need to be to to close as much business or to help my sales team close as much business. I don't need to pick up another sales resource to be better. What would you say to those types of people, or to what end, I guess, can a sales manager expect to benefit from a book like this?
I think it would give them structure. So that kind of leader is really, sounds like someone who he or she manages by the seat of their pants, doesn't necessarily have both a strategic long-term plan and even a shorter tactical plan. And it's not all about activity. It's not, or certainly not about the most number of demos that are probably horrible things to measure. So in the book, we allow what we call the 3+1 rules of SE leadership. And the reason there's +1 is we came up with the 3 rules and then realized we'd forgotten the most basic rule of all. So that was kind of rule 0. If it's good enough for Newton, right, and thermodynamics, it's good enough for us. So rule 1 is develop and serve your people. Rule 2 is run your business as a business, run sales engineering as a business. And then rule 3 is serve and delight your customers. And then rule 0, the overarching rule top everything, is basically manage yourself. If you can't manage yourself, then how can you be a role model and stay cool and calm and collected in a crisis and inspire and lead everybody else? So that's the whole framework that the book is written around. And I think everybody could use something like that as a guide to help them get better.
I just want to add a note to Benny's question. If there's any person, any human being, SE leader, SE manager, salesperson, software designer, that tells you I have nothing else to learn, like I should not pick up a book because I know everything already, then we're in dangerous territories of like thinking that you know everything. So it's always good to read a book just to see what other people think.
Yeah.
You may take advantage of what they wrote, you may completely ignore it, but at least know what other people think, which is the whole point of the podcast. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a podcast, and I would still think that spray and pray is the end-all be-all method for sales engineering.
There you go. Chris and I multiple times, we sat down talking about the book. It's wow. It's amazing the knowledge and experience that we gained in researching the book and speaking to other people. And we have. I hate to throw the number out. Chris and I have about 60 years of management experience between the two of us, and the amount of stuff that we learnt from other people was absolutely humbling. It really was. So I often felt that we should pay them.
Well, so about this, like this is geared towards SE leaders, SE managers, but you mentioned anybody could read it, anybody who's interested in becoming an SE manager. But someone like me, who right now there is no opportunities for SE management, how would I benefit from reading this book? Like, what's applicable to me?
So I think it guides your thinking. There's that again, the old cliche. You act and you dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have now. And so again, you don't necessarily need that manager title to be a leader within the organization. And going back to the previous podcast, casting a big shadow within the organization. So if you start to get some structure, honestly, you're probably not going to be working at the company that you are at now for the rest of your career. So it'd also prepare you to take on additional responsibilities, whether it's at your current position or in another position. And as you just pointed out a few minutes ago, it's constant learning. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter how experienced you are or how inexperienced you are, there's tons of material in books like these that can just make you sit back and go, wow, aha, never thought about it that way. And that's really what we're after.
Yeah, and I also believe that every SE is their own leader. So manage yourself is kind of, everybody should have that. The way you manage yourself might be a little bit different. Like the time spent could be a little bit different. But yeah. All right. So, sorry, did I interrupt?
No, I was going to say the reason that we actually wrote the book was very similar to the reason I wrote the very first book, Mastering Technical Sales, is that as an SC director at the time, I felt there was nobody out there who was doing training specifically for me and my people. We could go do generic presentation training. We could sit in the back of the class and go through solution selling for the third time. And what was the point? And then the same thing happened when we first started doing these leadership classes. I first started doing this 12, 14 years ago with a client. It was, again, sales engineers, as you all know, are very different from salespeople. They're a different animal. And you can get generic HR training. You can get sales-specific training, but no one has specific training for sales engineers and the tactical side. Even stuff like how to say no, how to run a QBR, like no one writes that down. So we thought it was about time that we did.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been through like the challenger sales and the solution selling courses, and in every session of those, I've asked, all right, so how is that applicable to me as an SE? And then the person doing the presentation is not an SE; he's a salesperson, and he'd have to look to the group, and one of those, my SE manager would have to translate. Like I knew how it would be applicable, like I could see it in my mind, but having someone else say it as well is also beneficial in reinforcing what I think I know. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There is barely any SE training. Now there is. I guess when you were a director, there wasn't so much.
No, and it's great the number of companies now that have started to focus on the world of the sales engineer. It used to be myself, Peter Cohan, great demo. That was basically it. Now you've got other companies that come along that touch various aspects of the job. And people ask me, what about the competition? So well, it's not competition. I mean, they're all striving to make the world of the sales engineer a better place to live in. There's enough to go around. Just come on in. It's a fantastic thing. Like finally, we're a profession, right?
Yeah. So I see your book. It's divided into like section 0, 1, and 2. So section 0 is manage yourself.
Yes.
What do you mean exactly by manage yourself?
So the analogy I make is you think about me, Ramsey, Binny. We have the inherent way we work. It's kind of like your operating system. And just like the operating system on the device you have in front of you right now, it needs to be continually upgraded, refined. There are bugs in it that need to get fixed. Pushing the analogy, people try and hack you, right, and make you do things you don't want to do. So it's all about improving the way that you work and you function personally so that you're in a better place to become a leader yourself. So whether that's time management, whether it's about the mix between tactical thinking and strategic thinking, whether it's just seriously thinking about what's your role as a first line SD manager when you go out on a sales call and you're going out on a call with a rep and an SE who works for you. You're no longer the super SD. It's not what you're being paid to do. So what is your role in that call? So it's really looking at a number of things, predominantly tactical, about the way that you manage and run yourself. How do we make Ramsey 2.0 into Ramsey 3.0 and just overall a better sales engineer, leader, and maybe even person generally?
And would you say that there's maybe some prerequisites that people should have even before getting into that first chapter? Would you say that people need to have some prerequisite experience either as an SC or as a manager before diving in? Or could you say anybody, even if they're just flirting with the idea of potentially being something with no experience of being an SC, with little experience or none at all even of being a manager, would you say that first manage yourself can still be applicable and then moving on from there?
the manage yourself is designed for pretty much anyone in the organization. So there's absolutely no requirement to have any kind of management or leadership experience before you pick up the book or you fire it up on the Kindle, and that's the intent. As to whether you have any SE experience, if you're going to be parachuted into a SE management role, it would certainly behoove you to read the book. If you're just looking at it from a general, what's it mean to be a sales engineer, I point you probably to the main Mastering Technical Sales book and say you probably want to read that first before you look at the leadership book.
Right.
So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that would be the advice.
Excellent.
So what would be the role of a sales engineer manager in calls? Like generally speaking, when I worked with SE managers, they don't go on too many calls with customers. Right? My former SE manager used to say that we are his customers, and his job was to make sure that we have everything we need to achieve our goals. And then he'd come with us on one or two. Maybe one. I've been on a customer call with him once where, he did great. But what was his role supposed to do? What was he supposed to do?
So there are many roles that you can take on. I mean, first of all, you are essentially the executive in the room from your company. Chris uses the phrase "the adult in the room." So potentially, it's your role to help up-level the conversation, making sure that everything stays on track. Probably your role to take away any action items that are bigger than just some product thing. Potentially for you to start making contacts higher up in the organization, helping the salesperson to do that. And then you're also there to really watch your SE as she or he goes about their business and does the demo, the discovery, whatever it is, which puts you in a better position to coach. You're not there to step in and be a super SE unless you absolutely have to save the call. That's really not your purpose to be on the call. It's more about an executive guide, and then to be able to provide feedback to the sales team in general about the call afterwards, so everyone can get better.
It's funny. If you met my SE manager, you would not think he's the adult in the room.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Well, he knows it. Like, yeah, we had that relationship. So, Benny, you had a question.
Yeah, so I guess about being the adult in the room and kind of being that executive on the call, or executive power on the call. A lot of the times, in my experience personally, when there's a sales executive in the room to kind of be that professional, that executive sponsor, they're kind of pushing the conversation to push the needle, obviously, towards a close. And that could be anything from, recommending next steps. It could be anything from the pricing conversations, really again, anything to try to get closer to that signature on a PO. For a sales engineering manager, though, would you say the scope of what they should be pushing for shouldn't really be limited, or rather should be limited to just getting the technical win? Or should they also be doing some of those other things to ultimately get the close beyond just the sales or beyond just the technical conversation?
I believe it's their role to encompass everything. I don't recall if on one of the previous podcasts we had the discussion about the technical win. I think it is one of the most horrible phrases we have in sales engineering. No one gets paid on the technical win. The technical win is not in any comp plans. It's potentially a useful metric internally within the SE organization. Externally, it's useless. I mean, there are so many opportunities that the three of us have been on where you've got, quote, the technical win and the business win doesn't happen, and you can't point your fingers at the sales guy or gal and say it's your fault. It's the sales team that's responsible to do it. So as such, this is one of the differences between being an SE and being in SE leadership is you need to have that bigger view, and you start to think about the issues around the close. And you're not going to directly ask for money. You're probably not going to directly ask for the customer to progress the PO forwards because you're stepping on the toes of the rep. But there are subtler and gentler ways of doing it. And again, being an individual SE or an SE leadership, you are most part more trusted by the customer, and the customer believes that you provide more value than the sales rep. So you need to utilize that.
No, that makes sense. That's such a good distinction to be made too. This idea that well, just the fact that the technical win doesn't really mean anything outside the organization. That's really cool. Personally, I know I use a lot internally to kind of see like what should we be doing to try to get the technical win, or how can we support this team to try to get the technical win. But you're right. Maybe I've been thinking about this wrong. I think now where we should be doing a little bit more to do a little bit more beyond just get that technical win and really support the team overall to get the overall win as opposed to just the technological win.
I don't think the SE should never stop at the technical win. You don't say, oh, I got the technical win. I, tick this box in Salesforce. I wash my hands and I'm done. That's not the way it works. Right. And it's a little bit of a personal crusade of mine, I will admit, and I will get on my soapbox and bemoan the technical win, but I just think it's a horrible thing to measure.
There's no way to guarantee that we actually had the technical win, because if the customer says, yeah, that's great, doesn't mean that we won. Just could mean that he thinks it's okay, and there is no objective way to measure if we have a technical win. It's just a feeling. I feel like we had the technical win. But something that worked out for me and my salesperson is every Monday we'd have a meeting and we talk about all the deals that he's working on and where are they in the sales cycle. And even those that are beyond the technical win, like my job was to go either visit the customer who's responsible or give them a call or whatever it is and just drop by and say hi. And generally an update would flow out of their mouths without me asking a question, just because I am the trusted advisor, as you mentioned in your books.
Yep. You got it. It's a beautiful thing. And the really smart salespeople know that, and they'll just let you go and do it, right? So
and I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for the PO. I didn't ask for anything. I just asked, hey, man, how are you doing? How's everything going with you? Oh, it's going great. About that thing that we were working on, yes, it's in the works, whatever. Perfect. I didn't ask that question, but thanks for letting me know. I'll let my sales guy know. I'm sure he'll be happy and he'll give you a hug.
Yeah.
So there is a chapter that caught my eye and I didn't get the chance to read it. And it is, what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. So that chapter is actually one of the most fun chapters, I think, in the book, and it came about. Originally as a little article I wrote a few years ago when I sat down after a sales conference. I think I'd given a keynote with a whole bunch of SE leaders, and we just had a general conversation. And someone said, well, what are the things that a new manager should watch out for? And we came up with this list of the 7 deadly sins, and it's obvious stuff like micromanagement. There's a fabulous book that a guy called Marshall Goldsmith wrote called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Yep. And it talks about letting go of what made you successful because now you need a whole bunch of new skills. And it fundamentally revolves around that. And so it's kind of one of the chapters in the book is don't do this and don't do that and don't do that. Instead, try this instead. So it's really a guide that you should look at. And I had these 7 deadly sins written down on a little index card, which I don't have in front of me now. It's up in my other office. And people who got to know me well and worked for me would sometimes come in and say, hey, John, to number 3 on there, you've been doing a lot of that lately. You need to kind of back off. It's like, oh, okay. So it was also a low-key way for some of my directs to just slap me around a little bit. Tell me.
Okay, so people used it against you as well.
Yes, you could say against me. I think they leveraged it to improve my behavior. So
okay,
that's needed improving a number of times.
That's kind of interesting in and of itself, though. This idea that you've already kind of called out. These are maybe some biases that you have towards maybe some not so effective practices, just maybe some human nature things, and just kind of falling into those natural mistakes. But having already called it out, you opened up the door for your sales team or for your direct reports to call you out to correct your actions. So I guess where I'm trying to go with this is that even if you do know everything that's right, I guess even you, like the literal author of kind of what sales engineering and sales engineering management should be or could be, you still make mistakes. So would you say, I guess, for a lot of people maybe listening that may think that to be the best, you can't make mistakes ever. What would you say to those types of people, just hearing the fact that you had to get corrected on those types of things?
Oh, you have to embrace your mistakes. I think there's a quote from Winston Churchill at the front of the chapter. Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Um, that's really what it is, right? So there are so many things that can go wrong. I mean, the number one sin is expecting perfection. And you are only human, and your people are only human. So it's okay if you mess up, and then you admit it, and you take corrective steps, and you learn from it, and potentially document it, so others can move on. So that's kind of the cool thing about that. And it varies culturally. So there's certainly a few parts of Asia where the boss needs to be viewed as they make no mistakes ever, and there's no sign of weakness. But certainly in the quote the Western world, it's okay. And I think expecting perfection is kind of right up there with micromanagement in terms of like really terrible leadership behavior.
Right. Maybe one more quick question, just because you mentioned this idea of cultural differences in places like Asia, especially with respect to leadership, but even beyond that, are very existent compared to what or how things are done perhaps in North America or in Europe or other places as well. How do you account for that, I guess, or how did you account for that writing both your both the first two versions and then now this leadership version as well? How did you account for all the cultural nuances of every respective region?
Well, I don't know if we accounted for everything, so that's kind of the sales engineer caveat right there. One of the great things that Chris brought to the table was the fact that he was VP of pre-sales and post-sales for Symantec out in APAC. So he lived in Singapore for a number of years. So Chris is pretty familiar with the different cultures out there. Obviously, given my background, being a Brit now living over here in the US, I have a little bit more of the European as well. So we did try and take account through footnotes and everything else in terms of there are certainly cultural differences. But I encourage anybody who reads this, you definitely need to put your own cultural veneer over the top of it and apply what my wife jokingly calls the law of common sense, right? So if you read something in a book and it just says, oh, that's never going to work, you have to ask yourself, well, is that just my visceral reaction, or is that actually true? And if it doesn't feel good, then you probably shouldn't do it. But if you think, oh, that might make a difference, give it a shot. But even if your manager in some of the most bureaucratic organizations in the world in that kind of culture, there's still a way of getting kind of feedback and learning from the people who work for you. And you obviously want to do that.
From my personal directive is, if I learn something new, I don't try it on large opportunities. I try it on like smaller opportunities, see how that works, and then if it works, I start graduating it to bigger and bigger opportunities. It's just one way to stay safe while doing it, because if I mess up, I don't want to be called out as the guy.
I think it's called scaffolding, where you kind of like start off at a level, then kind of keep on, like you get higher and higher by kind of practicing on maybe incrementally more valuable things, or where the stakes get incrementally higher, you kind of move up bit by bit.
Yeah. You may have made that up. I'm not sure, but I'll trust you. I'll trust you on it.
It goes back to one of the other big concepts in the book, and we talk about a story of the British rowing team about 20, 25 years ago, and they were terrible. And so they came together preparing for the Olympics in Sydney, and they had this one fundamental concept. And everything they did, they asked themselves the question, does it make the boat go faster?
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of question that sales engineering leaders need to ask themselves too, even a small team. Does it make the boat go faster? Is what I'm doing, is this going to help drive deals faster? Is it going to help improve? Is it going to enable our partners so they can go out there and do things? And if the answer is no, it's not going to make the boat go faster, then you seriously need to think about, is this something that I want to do? And that's been a guiding philosophy since I read that story like 20 years ago. Pretty much anyone who's worked for me will tell you, oh, did John ask you about the boat? It's just that.
So how do you measure, in terms of sales engineer, how do you measure if the boat is going faster? What is the boat in this case? Is it the sales process? Is it a demo? Or what are we measuring?
Well, so there you jump over into rule 2, Ramsey, which is run sales engineering as a business. So many SE organizations are tactical and they're reactive. They just run after the customer or the sales rep that yells the loudest. And other than maybe a few monetary measures, they don't really have anything that they're measuring. So, section 2, or rule 2, is all about how do you figure out what's the brand of sales engineering? What is it? What are the important metrics that you should measure? If you measure them, what's going to happen? If they're out of band, how do you get them in band? Which ones are strategic? Which ones are tactical? And that differs for almost every single organization. But there are certain things that you can look at. And so we recommend that you kind of put them into 4 buckets. I like buckets, so 4 buckets. The one's around learning and growth. So how good are your people and are they getting better? What can they do well? What things do they not do so well? There's one around process. So that covers internal processes. So that's even stuff like POCs, RFPs, demos, things like that. Then there's a third one around the customer. So how are you doing with the customer in terms of customer happiness, referenceability, rollouts of products, things like that. Then the fourth one is good old finance, which normally falls back into time, money, and people around moving deals through the pipeline. And every organization looks at how you do this a little bit differently. The point being, if as an SC leader you're sitting in one of those infamous QBRs, a quarterly business review, and there's a bunch of sales people saying, "Oh, well, my guys tell me, I feel that," and as the SE leader, you've actually got data. If you're any good at your job, the data overcomes the emotion, and you can make sure that the right decisions are made. If you have no data that backs up your point, usually the reps are way better at selling than you are in those meetings, and
So how does one
going to happen?
Like, I know my SE manager in the previous company tried to implement, like, if we're going to do a demo, put it in Salesforce. If we're helping the customer with this, put it in Salesforce. And almost every SE did not flat out refuse to do it, but made their lives very hard in doing so. So how can an SE manager capture data if the SEs are not bought in 100% into why they're capturing that data?
And so that last sentence is the most critical path in terms of getting SE buy-in. And the advice we give and where we've seen it been effective is if you gather data, the SEs need to see leaders using that data to make their life better, i.e. you need to hold, for example, other parts of the organization accountable. And if you discover that your SEs are doing 23% of their work on post-sales activity and jumping in because services or partners or support maybe isn't doing the job they should be doing, if you have that data and suddenly some of that stuff disappears and the SE's life becomes measurably better, then that's what it is. So it needs to be kind of data that you use to push out and not data that you kick down and you beat up the SEs about.
Okay.
So it needs to be done for the greater good. Because otherwise it truly is a two-edged sword. And if you measure something, we say we want to see 60% of the hours that are spent doing X, then eventually, because SEs are so smart, within 6 weeks, 60% of the time is going to be spent doing X because that's what you expect.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I want to repeat that. So the measurements or the information you're trying to get from SEs are meant to help their lives get better, not make their lives harder.
Yes. If you collect data from SEs and then, as an SE manager or director, you go sit down with your SEs and, virtually smack them around saying, you've only done 3 demos in the last 6 weeks. Why is that? There's probably a really good reason for it. But if you know that because of data they've entered, what do you want, right? So, I mean, you can use it. There's obviously something bad happening or there's some behavioral modification. But for the most part, as a leader, you're using this to run your business and work better with customers, with partners, with reps and other parts of the organization. And that's where the power comes in. And that's really what Rule 2 is all about. It's push out data and make the organization better and not beat up internally.
Nice.
And it actually kind of makes sense too, this idea of, your direct reports are the sales engineers in the organization. And if you are running your sales engineering organization as a business, you want your employees essentially to be as productive as they can be. And in order to be productive, they have to be happy one way or another. So So yeah, making sure that their lives are being made easier is great, and also is a good way of building loyalty, I'm sure, as well. This idea that if a sales engineer sees that measurable difference that you describe, then how would I not want to, work for this person that's making my life easier a little bit better, and why would I not want to go the extra mile to make their lives a little bit easier? Like, as a sales engineer whose life has now been made easier, why would I not want to be able to make my boss's job easier as well? So it all kind of, I don't know, kind of rolls over and rolls through, and gets better.
Exactly. We had a customer of ours last year, about 50 SEs in the organization, and they discovered that their SEs were spending an inordinate amount of time doing post-sales activity. And they were really enabling bad behavior on the part of tech support in particular. And tech support weren't doing everything they could do to deal with escalations and everything else. And so the VP of sales engineering sat down with her counterpart within support, kind of figured out a different way of doing this, and gradually handed that work back. And about 3 months later, when they measured the data in the following quarter, they'd pretty much given every SE in the organization 3 hours a week back to go sell, as opposed to be, preventative and playing defense. So 3 hours a week, 50 SEs. I mean, imagine the productivity that you gain from that. It's pretty phenomenal, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But if she hadn't have got some basic data measurement, that was it. And again, it's not about time tracking; it's just about activity tracking. So it wasn't down to a precise hour, but it was just amazing. And so that was the leverage that she had in sitting down and making that change.
Makes sense. I love the idea too of being able to collect the information in these different types of buckets, whether they be the four that you defined, or otherwise those that some other sales engineer manager thinks might be more applicable. I'm just kind of speaking off the top of my head. Then from there, once you kind of have these little metrics on each of these different buckets, then even if you, like you said, you've only see maybe 3 demos happening per week in this one bucket, it could be that the impact in another bucket is quite substantial, and then the impact from that metric could have kind of carried over somewhere else. And so if a sales engineer manager is able to collect data and a good variety of types of data that speaks to the effectiveness of their organization, the better story they can tell, as opposed to only collecting some very nuanced metrics or some very specific metrics. It's good to have a good wide breadth of how things are going. I love that.
I mean, there's another SEVP I know tells a story there. So last year, from their system, they figured out that they were getting something like an 88% conversion rate on POCs, which is a really good number, right? A new regional vice president of sales comes in, takes one look at that number, and immediately issues the edict to everyone in his sales organization: go get more POCs, proof of concepts. And so the VP runs into the office and says, no, don't do that. The reason it's 88% is because we very carefully control who goes into the POC. There's a process and everything else. And if you just open this up, we'll run more POCs, but the conversion rate will drop down to 60%, and we'll actually generate less money. But if you didn't have the data to prove how it was done, all kinds of bad things would happen. It would have totally demoralized the SE team, and you know how that story goes. So it's the power of data. If you put it in the hand of an engineer who's reasonably communicative, great things happen. And so that's rule 2.
It's like too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I did want to jump to rule 3, which is serve your customers. In my mind, I didn't think that the SE manager is going to work a lot with customers. Like, they're taking a step back. What is the role of the SE manager with customers? How do they serve them?
Well, so this is one of those definition things. So what is a customer to a sales engineering organization? And within a tech company, SEs probably have the most customers, because you have the end user customers, the one who give you money, right? You have the salespeople, the sales organization, who are essentially your customers. And in most companies, you have the partner organization, third parties, who are your customers as well. So as an SE leader, you actually have 3 sets of customers that you need to keep happy. And then you could make a case that even your employees are a customer as well, or that's more covered in rule 1. So I think an SE leader who gets too far away from the customer and is not out there on the sharp end dealing with customers, kind of loses contact about what's really happening out in the marketplace. And back when I was a SE director and SE VP, I would always go out of my way to get customer time to find out exactly what was happening, what was going on the ground, so I didn't just have this elevated version and filtered data of what was coming in. So, as you certainly move up the hierarchy in an SE organization, not just an SE organization, any organization, you get filtered stuff. And so quite often you need to be out there on the sharp end, as we call it, dealing with customers and seeing what goes on. And the closer you are to the money in times of economic downtime, the safer your position is too. So there's a selfish aspect to it as well.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that my former manager said that SEs are part of his customers, so he does like weekly checks or whatever, messages us. But it's harder for them to keep contact with customers, so they have to go through SEs, right? Or are you saying they go directly bypass SEs? How would one do that?
Depends on the organization. Certainly when I was an SE leader, there were some customers I'd known for a while, and I could just give them a call and go out with a director or VP from one of my organizations and a few CIOs that I still know today. Other times it's just part of the sales strategy that you put in place with the team. And there are certain situations where it might just make sense that the SE leader is that point of contact with someone at your client where you're trying to get a deal done, just because they're in the position to provide the best value and the best trust. We say that the days of SEs just dealing with techies and the sales team dealing with the line of business and executives are gone. I mean, that's the way it used to be 20 years ago. Now you look at who's in the best position to drive the deal forward, build the most relationship, build that trusted relationship, and off you go. And it might be the case where you've got some 24-year-old rookie sales engineer who's actually in the best position to build a relationship with a CSO, for example. So off you go, and you let them do it. And so at least in a good part of the world, title and rank doesn't always drive the relationship. Quite often it's value that drives the relationship. And that's where you as the SE leader can provide your input.
And also just as a coach or as a leader in general, sometimes, the people reporting to you or the people playing for you are a reflection of who you are anyway. So even though you're not the one that is speaking as an SE manager or an SE leader, you're not the one directly speaking to the customer, let's say an external customer, how they're being spoken to still reflects on you though. So you still need to make sure that your team is well prepared to best reflect how they should be, as opposed to just letting them be because you're not that person actually making contact.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it right there, Benny. Chris and I speak a lot about brand in the book, and what's your personal brand as an SE leader, and then what's the brand of your sales engineering organization. And we loosely define brand as what do people say about you when you're not in the room. So you're absolutely right. When an SE goes out and does their thing in front of a customer, is working with a rep, enabling a partner, they're essentially a reflection on you as a leader. So the better off you can prepare those people to go out and do their thing, the stronger the SE brand comes. And that kind of flips you all the way back to rule one again, right? Which is develop and serve your people, which I think is it's number one because it is the most important thing. And that's your main role as a leader, is to make your people better. Right? And you're no longer the super SE, and that's the mistake that many young SE managers make, in that it's the old story, right? You're a rock star SE, and then someone says, hey, Benny, you're a great SE, we're going to make you a manager. You go, oh, okay, well, thanks. What's the comp plan? And then and then potentially you've taken obligatory managing within the law virtual session from HR to give you some materials, and then out you go into the wild, and you get no training. And so you think, oh, well, I was really successful because I was a great SE, I'm going to continue to do that. And that's pretty much the biggest mistake that most first-time managers make, is they don't let go of what made them successful. Back to the what got you here won't get you there. So again, if you start thinking about what's your brand and what is it that you want to stand for, and what do you want people to say about Benny when he's not in the room, I think that's a very important part of becoming a leader.
Agreed.
That's something that Liz mentioned on her podcast. She said that when she became an SE leader, her problems took like a back seat to her helping everybody else with their problems. And that's sometimes very hard to do, especially when you've been an individual for so long. Because SEs, although we work as part of the team, we own our own customers, we have our own problems, so we don't really work as teams. But yeah, that's awesome.
And so within that whole structure, rule one, develop and serve your people, there's a concept called radar. And as you probably figured out by now, John loves acronyms. And more so, believe it or not, than most tech people. But actually, it's more like a mnemonic. So radar stands for recruit, attract, develop, advance, retain. So it's kind of the 5 phases as you go through onboarding and then developing and moving someone through your SE organization. And so section 1 kind of really breaks down into radar and the different steps that you take as you go out and start recruiting people. Then attract is actually closing the deal and getting them into your organization. Develop, pretty self-obvious, except you have to do it. Advance, so how do you make your people better? Whether they want to become a better SE, whether they want to go into sales, they want to take your job, and they want to go to product marketing, whatever it might be. And then retain, which a lot of managers don't focus on until it's too late. So radar is the whole life cycle, and that's really the big structure that underlies rule 1. And for most first-time managers, if you get nothing else out of the book other than radar and does it make the boat go faster, I'd say it's probably worth the money.
Yeah, I was thinking the radar goes on a boat, but no, that's actually sonar. So never mind. So about that, for recruiting, I've seen a lot of hiring managers recruit when they absolutely need to, when like someone leaves and now they have to get someone. What's the best way to recruit SEs?
Recruiting is very analogous to discovery on the sales side. It's something you should be doing constantly. So it's the job of every SE leader to be constantly recruiting and to build a bench.
Yeah.
If you look back at the great sports teams through history, it's not just the players who are on the field, it's also the bench and the people who can come in as substitutes. And so that's really the same concept that you want to apply to building an SE team. Is you always want to have a number of people out there that you can tap into and fill a headcount. It might not be because someone quits. It might be because someone gets promoted, someone decides to take a position in another part of the organization, and you need to fill that headcount. So again, you shouldn't be panicking if you suddenly have an open headcount. You should have a pipeline that you can tap into and fill. And you should dedicate, I used to have a rule of thumb, like 2 hours every week to working the recruiting pipeline.
Okay. I feel like I can dig into that for hours. Could you briefly like summarize, like, what do you mean working the recruiting for 2 hours? How does that work?
It could mean just tapping in, making contact with people. When I was an SE leader, I would have a list of people who I would consider recruiting and bringing into my team. Whether it's a direct into me or one of my managers potentially have, and I would just stay in regular contact with them. So it wouldn't be suddenly you ping them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I've got a job, are you interested? And you've already got that relationship built up.
And it's so much easier right now with LinkedIn. Like, you can start building that relationship very early on.
You can. You can't become overly reliant on it. It is just one of the communication channels that you need to use. And recruiters who just solely use LinkedIn, I think, are losing sight of many other ways to stuff up the pipeline. I mean, we have a fun game in our classes where we ask people, though, what was your job position or your job title before you became a sales engineer? Especially with the managers. And as you well know, sales engineers come from every walk of life. So if you're just recruiting and you're looking at sales engineer or people who've got some communicative skills, you're missing out probably 2/3 of your potential recruiting market. So you need to cast a wider net. You need to sit down with HR and seriously investigate what are the job requirements to become a sales engineer. Do they really need a 4-year degree in information technology? Do they really need this much experience? And if you go through the job requirements, bullet point by bullet point by bullet point, quite a lot of them are redundant or can be worked around.
Yeah.
So I think you need to be flexible and take a much wider view of where your next potential rockstar SE recruit can come from. And that's sometimes hard to do, but organizationally, it builds and improves your brand again.
100%. Even maybe to piggyback off of the idea that it's hard to do, still speaks to the importance of this idea that even as a manager, you still need to be very well aware as to who are your customers and what do they need. Because really those are the things that, or I think anyways, those are the things that are going to help drive what are the things you're looking for in somebody, is in knowing how it is that your team is going to be able to best deliver value to your customers. So you just need to be able to be aware of things if you're not on the front lines.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most powerful phrases, and we talk about this in section 3, one of the most powerful phrases an SE leader has is, my customers tell me that, and cite specifics. And it's a fantastic way of dealing with product management, product marketing, VPs of engineering, because you've got data about how your customers actually use your portfolio and what other things do they want in the portfolio, and even more to the point, why have you lost deals because something wasn't in there. And all the best market research in the world that an engineering team does cannot compete with your direct experience of what customers tell you and what you see from your team. So that phrase, that my customers tell me, is a fantastic way to remove roadblocks in terms of getting things done within an organization. Would it work in an Oracle? No, probably not. But would it work in any company up to $3 or $4 billion? Yeah, it probably would. Yeah. Actually, it does. Not probably. I mean, I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I've used that phrase, and yes. I read in chapter 31, the real customer. You have a couple stories there about working with engineering and how you overcame, or how the team overcame, the research done by engineering about
yes, good old computer associates. Yeah.
So we are about to move on to the not so fly round, but before we go, I just want to make sure: is there a question that we should have asked but we didn't today?
Great question, which one of your other presenters told you should never say. See, I do listen. No, I think we covered it. Again, the intent of the book is just to make life easier for people who are currently in SE leadership. If you're thinking about taking the role, it's a relatively quick read. Go through it, and it might tell you whether it's something you really want to do or not. I mean, our surveys say that somewhere between 35 and 40% of SEs, individual contributors, say that in the next 30 months they want to become a manager. They don't always know why. Your number's a little higher, but it's still a significant chunk of the population. So how do you cater to those people? For the other people who want to stay and just be an SE, but become a better SE, become a senior, a principal, a master principal, whatever it is, how do you, again, develop, advance, and retain those people? So it's just really giving you a structure and some discipline as you go around that complicated thing called management. So for an hour, I think we managed to cover most of the concepts.
Yeah, no, this was good. So maybe we'll do the not so fire round in maybe a fire round fashion. So Benny, you want to take the first question?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if we've asked you this question before ever, but just maybe within the context of the book, typically what we ask is this idea of what do you love about being an SE? But maybe on the flip side, due to the content or context of this book, what would you love about being an SE manager?
Oh, I think it's one of the best jobs in the world. I mean, I stepped out of the corporate world many years ago, obviously, and people ask me, do I miss it? And for the most part, I don't, except for the one thing around developing, advancing, mentoring, and coaching people. And if you're somebody who likes to make or not help other people get better and improve and make a difference, then I think it's a fabulous job. And as an SE leader, you're perfectly placed to do that because you touch so many parts of the organization and can help so many people. So that, I think that's the best thing. And it's a little generic in the most leaders will probably tell you that. But as an SE, I mean, you can really make a difference. So
Nice.
I love that.
Question number 2, which is usually what's one thing you hate about the job or you would like to change, but we're going to change this right now. You already mentioned the first mistake that you see new SE leaders do, which is I can't remember. I just drew a blank. We'll go back. We'll rewind. We'll talk
rewind
about
that.
Yeah, but what is the second mistake you see SE managers or new SE managers do, and what should they do to fix it?
So if the major mistake is either micromanagement or expecting perfection, the next thing to do is trying to turn everyone into a version of them.
Yeah.
Everyone is different. Everyone is not like you. So you need to utilize the strengths of people and leverage the strengths of people. And how does that make everyone in the team better? And because SEs were fundamentally pack animals. If an SE is struggling, other SEs will step in and help him or her. Right? It's the way we are. You contrast that to a rep. If a rep is struggling, another SE will step in. Only if they get a share of the deal.
Yeah.
And that's a little cynical, but it's kind of the way it works. So that whole pack animal thing, and if you can make other people better within the organization, I think that's a major part of being a leader, whether you have a title or not.
Okay, good.
Awesome. So that brings us to the third question here, which are, well, we've been talking about one already, but what are some books, tools, or resources you'd recommend to for any new leader, SE leader, manager, anything of the sort?
So the two favorite books I have, so one I've already referenced a few times, which is Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. There's actually, and also for the female SE leader, there's a kind of a quote woman's version of it as well, because obviously you need to play that a little different. And I would absolutely recommend that book. It's something that I have it on my bookcase right behind me. It's got pride of place up there. Second one is, believe it or not, a book about negotiation by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference. And as SEs, as SE leaders, as people in general, you are constantly negotiating with people. And again, it kind of gives you a framework and a strategy to go about it and do it. I mean, if you go on Amazon and type in leadership, or management, I think you get over 500,000 hits. I mean, all the way to, Winnie the Pooh and management, right? So there's all kinds of books around it. So it's really just picking something that works for you. And our book, Chris and I provided, is just one more that sits in there. But Marshall Goldsmith's book and Chris Voss's book are both two relatively easy reads that can make your life a lot better. And, at least Marshall's book was life-changing for me. So I would recommend that to anybody.
Okay, cool. Nice.
I'd even say just maybe a quick point about, so I haven't read Marshall's book yet, but did just finish Chris's book not too long ago. And I don't know, I was always averse to reading business books for a while, but that one was kind of, so Never Split the Difference kind of came up time and time again in all sorts of conversations. And for those that, are sometimes, might think a business book might be dry, you're probably right in a lot of examples, but this one, Chris Voss used to be the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. So being able to learn from somebody from him and being able to hear from his experiences were fascinating, not only from a business perspective, but just from a life perspective as well. So that was a great one. But the fact that Marshall's book changed your life, obviously that's a huge endorsement as well.
That is one. And then I would say, based on actually a couple of recommendations from people who've been on your podcast, I have Radical Candor queued up on my iPad here as the next book I'm going to be reading. So looking forward to that.
All right. So last question of the day. What do you think separates good or great SE managers from the good or the not so great ones?
The rockstar SE manager has empathy. And I think if there's one thing that stands out for a great manager, it's empathy, understanding what motivates, what drives or does not drive each and every one of the people who work for him or her, then how to apply that and how to make everyone better. I think that how to make everyone better is what makes a difference. And if I can tell a little personal story at the end, actually about my son. So my son was a soccer player, football, played Division I, all 4 years. I started practically every game, and His senior year, he was voted player of the year for his team. But if you look at the stats, there was not a single stat that Matt had. He scored no goals, didn't make any assists. But if you went back and you asked the other 21 people on the squad why they chose Matt as the player of the year, he said, he made us all better. Whenever we were in trouble, we needed an outlet pass. Whenever we needed some direction, whenever we needed somebody on the field to help us, make a change in strategy, to do something different, to give us a tip, we knew we could rely on Matt, and he understood what we needed. But if you just look at it from hard statistics, there was nothing there. And I think that's the same thing about a great rock star SE leader is you kind of notice they're not there, except everyone who works for them is just continually getting better and better and better and improving, and they have a brand. And it all eventually comes back to that brand. What do people say about you when you're not in the room, about you and your team?
Yep.
And if you are happy, confident that they will say amazing things about you and your team when you're not in the room, then I think you've done your job as the absolute rock star SE leader.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's the intangibles.
It is, and that's the kind of stuff you can't put in a book.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, that's a good way to end. So, where can people find out more about you and get their book?
Excuse me. So they can go visit the website. So www.masteringtechnicalsales.com. And there's all kinds of information about all three of the books there. You can also go on Amazon. And if you search for Sales Engineer, you'll find the 3 books on there. The newest book is out as an ebook and a paperback in parts of the world where Amazon actually publishes paperbacks. If you're in Singapore, Australia, or Brazil, you have to get the ebook. Pretty much most other parts of the world, you can get the hard copy or the ebook. And give it a read and see how you can make the boat go faster.
So we will have a link to the books on WeTheSalesEngineers.com/show108. Thanks a lot, John, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. And thanks for everything you do for the community. I said it's a wonderful thing. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, gents. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Happy Star Wars Day.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Be with you. Love it.
All right.
Well, thanks, John, for coming on. That was awesome, man. We know not to use the word technical win anymore. He re-emphasized that after we stopped recording. So,
indeed. There were a lot of really good things, though, from this. I mean, just kind of getting John's perspective a little bit more as to what is a true leader supposed to be doing in an organization, and giving some tactics and tips and some good, really handy acronyms, too, to help remember what are the things you need to be worried about and concerned about when you're running a team or leading a team. Were awesome. I really enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, like this whole thing, we were talking about the book, and it's a very good book, but I hope you got something out of what we were just talking about. Like, I believe any SE should buy the book. I got a soft copy right now, but I'm going to buy the physical book, added to Mastering Technical Sales right there. So behind me if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that there's a book behind me. I don't know where I'm playing it. Anyways, so yeah, like it's a good book. I started reading the soft copy. He sent it to me privately, and it's a very good book so far. Looking forward to reading the rest of it. So
awesome. Yeah, no, I look forward to writing up the notes for these. I look forward to anybody to read them as well. It's going to be quite a bit of good content in here. And I'm just even covering like what is the mandate of a sales leader, kind of going through different sections of the book, and
it's not getting the technical win, that's for sure.
Not necessarily, exactly. Yeah. It's not just that, anyways.
Don't say that. If John's gonna listen, he's gonna come up here and like fight with you. There is no technical wins anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would still say that, and I feel like he might have.
How would you define a technical win?
So, okay, so how would I define a technical win? So I would define a technical win as getting confirmation or giving a customer confidence that the solution that you have to provide is going to meet all their technical requirements. But I don't think, especially after today, I don't believe that that's the be-all, end-all for what a sales engineering team should be looking for. I think it's still very important. I still think you need to have it. I mean, you can't really go on without it.
How do you know it's a win? Like you show them that the product works. How do you know that you won this? Because win usually means like you show them that this worked and that's it. You're getting the PO. They confirm they're getting the PO, right?
So I guess it depends on the length of the sales cycle, but I think it has to do a little bit with discovery as well. So as you're demonstrating things, you have to be asking questions and getting that affirmation that what you're showing is actually going to show value. And by the end of it all, just don't assume that if they've said yes all the way along, that it actually will work for them. Kind of close off that conversation again by saying that, at least with respect to what we've shown you today, is this solution going to meet all of the requirements that you need? And then given that they give the okay there, then they can't come back after the fact to say that, the solution doesn't do X, Y, and Z, because actually it did, and they confirmed it during the call. But then I guess again, the big learning out for me was the idea that that's not the be all end all. You got to do so much more beyond just to get the technical win as a sales engineer and as the SE team.
Yeah, I feel like that's so subjective. They could like, they might not care and say, yeah, sure, it does everything we want, just let us get out of this room, right? Or it could be that something else comes up later on. Like you showed us it does A, B, and C, but we remember that we need D as well. So you didn't show us that. So is that still a technical win? It's just, there is no, in my opinion, there is no way to actually capture that information really well. Right.
I guess maybe not just in a single instance. While it may be possible, I think it's important to think of it as a continuous thing, though, where even if it's not in a single interaction, even if it does take a second interaction because they remember D, and then you have to show them D afterwards. I think so long, just overall, the technical win is just giving them the full confidence that you can deliver on a technical perspective, but then that doesn't consider pricing, it doesn't consider other timelines, doesn't consider anything like that. It's just the idea of, will the solution work for what I need it to do?
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, we're gonna have this debate for forever. But like when we say like we won the opportunity, that means we have the PO in hand.
Correct. I agree.
There is nothing like that with a technical win. It's still, sure, we believe we won because another vendor might have shown the exact same thing and they might have the technical win, but we can't both be winners, right? So how, like,
I think there could be multiple technical winners, but you're right. There is only one overall winner. And so that's why it's not the one thing to fixate on. But I still think it is a thing. I just don't think anymore that it's the one thing to fixate on.
Okay. Well, then don't say that in front of John next time we meet him.
Okay.
Believe whatever you want to believe. This is a free country. Not right now. Right now, we're all stuck inside. We're locked down. But in general, it's a free country. So believe whatever you want. And I believe you're wrong. With that, so show us on show 108, wetheSalesEngineers.com/show 108. Thanks again, John, for coming on. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of banter where I'm on your side and Benny is not, while you're walking in Florida on the beach. I'm not jealous. With that, this is Ramsey. Do you want to say something before we go?
Just very quickly, if you haven't done it yet, do please leave some comments, leave a rating on wherever it is you're downloading this podcast. It really does help a lot. Yeah, be honest with your feedback and do provide some sense of whether or not you're enjoying this or not. So leave a rating, iTunes, Spotify, wherever again you're getting your podcast. That'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. With that, this is Ramsey for Benny, and we're signing off.